The smell of antiseptic filled the small, dimly lit hospital room as Emily pressed the stethoscope against her patient's frail chest. The rhythmic but faint thump of his heart echoed in her ears, slow and even, almost fragile enough to shatter with one wrong breath. His name was James Whitmore, a quiet widower admitted weeks ago with a failing heart and a shadow in his lungs. Everyone said he wouldn't make it past the month. Yet every time Emily stepped into his room, he'd smile, a smile that hid 1,000 unspoken stories and a strange peace that both comforted and broke her. Her shift was long, the pay barely enough to cover rent and her mother's medication. But nursing wasn't just a job for Emily. It was her calling. She believed in kindness, in second chances, in the magic of compassion. Yet she had no idea that her next act of compassion would change her life forever. Before we go further, if stories of love, hope, and humanity touch your heart, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers of Kindness. Your support helps us share more inspiring tales that remind the world that kindness still matters. Emily had always noticed something different about James. He was polite, soft-spoken, and surprisingly thoughtful for someone facing death. He'd ask about her day, about her mother, about her dreams. Most patients in the ward spoke only of pain and fear. But James talked about sunsets, music, and life's beautiful ironies. One night, as she was tucking his blanket, he whispered, "You know, Nurse Emily, people only realize how rich they were when they start losing what can't be bought. Time, love, breath." She smiled, though her eyes stung. "You speak like a poet, Mr. Whitmore," he chuckled weakly. "No, just a man who spent too long chasing the wrong kind of wealth." Emily didn't know what he meant then, but she felt something stir in her heart. He reminded her of her late father, who'd always said that kindness was the only currency that never lost its value. Days turned into weeks. James grew weaker, but his spirit remained unbroken. Emily often found herself staying past her shift, reading to him, bringing him tea, listening to his stories. Rumors started to spread in the ward. A young nurse spending too much time with a dying old man. She ignored them. To her, it wasn't pity, it was purpose. Then, one evening, James called her closer. His eyes glistened under the pale hospital light. "Emily, would you do something extraordinary for me?" "Anything, miss," she blinked. "Whitmore, I don't have long. The doctors made that clear, but I don't want to die alone. I've lived with wealth, fame, and everything people think they want, but none of it matters without love. My wife died years ago. My children, they stopped talking to me when I remarried, long before she passed. I've been alone ever since." He paused, his voice trembling. "Would you marry me, Emily? Just so I don't leave this world unloved?" The words froze in the air. Emily's heart raced. She wanted to speak, but nothing came. She knew it wasn't love. Not yet. But how could she refuse such a final wish? Still, the thought of marrying a dying man, a stranger whose life she barely knew, it frightened her. That night, she sat by her mother's bedside seeking counsel. Her mother, wise and gentle despite her illness, smiled faintly. "Sweetheart, sometimes God puts us in people's lives not to fix them, but to heal something inside ourselves. If your heart says yes, not out of pity, but compassion, then that's the right answer." The next day, Emily returned to his room with tears in her eyes and courage in her heart. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore," she whispered. "I'll marry you." The hospital chapel was small, its stained glass windows catching the soft gold of the morning sun. James wore a simple suit. Emily wore a borrowed white dress, too big for her frame but glowing with sincerity. A few nurses and a chaplain bore witness as they exchanged vows. There were no rings, no music, no family. Just two souls finding solace in a world that had given them too much pain. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, James reached for her hand. His fingers were cold, trembling, but his eyes were full of peace. "Thank you, Emily," he whispered. "You've given me more than you'll ever know." For the next few days, Emily stayed by his side, reading poetry, humming lullabies, holding his hand through the long nights. She had never known such quiet intimacy, no romance, no promises, just a deep, wordless understanding that love can exist even in its gentlest, briefest forms. Then, one rainy night as thunder rolled outside, James woke her with a faint squeeze of her hand. "Promise me one thing," he said, his voice barely audible. "Don't let the world make you hard. There's beauty in your kindness. Protect it." Before she could respond, his hand went limp. The heart monitor flatlined. Emily's world shattered. She held him close, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "You're not alone, not anymore." Days after the funeral, Emily returned to her tiny apartment, numb and broken. Her coworkers called her foolish, a nurse who married a dying man. But to Emily, it wasn't foolishness. It was humanity. Then, A week later, a man in a sharp gray suit knocked on her door. "Mrs. Whitmore," he asked gently. "I'm Mr. Langford, your husband's attorney. I'm here for the reading of his will." Her husband's will? Emily was confused. James had told her he was just an old retired teacher. At the lawyer's office, Emily sat in silence as the letter was read aloud. To my wife, Emily Grace Whitmore, the woman who gave me love when I had nothing left. I leave everything I have. My home, my assets, and my heart's legacy. She doesn't know this, but I am James Whitmore, owner and founder of Whitmore Medical Holdings. I built hospitals but forgot how to heal hearts, until she taught me again. Emily's breath caught. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She was married to the billionaire owner of the very hospital she worked in. The nurses, the doctors, even the board, all had unknowingly served the man she'd married out of compassion. The lawyer handed her an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note: "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But please don't think this was a trick. I didn't tell you who I was because I wanted someone to love me for the man I am, not the fortune I built. You did that and more. Use what I've left you not for luxury, but for healing others, the way you healed me. Love, James." Emily sobbed uncontrollably. The man she thought was dying and poor had left her an empire, not as a reward but as a responsibility. She didn't move into the mansion he left behind. Instead, she turned his wealth into something greater, creating free clinics for struggling families, scholarships for nursing students, and care centers for the elderly. She named them the Whitmore Grace Foundation. Every corridor, every smiling patient reminded her of him. Sometimes late at night, she'd sit by a patient's bedside, just like she had with James, holding their hand through the silence, because she knew now what he meant when he said love is the wealth that never runs out. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers of Kindness. Every click helps us spread more true tales of love, sacrifice, and the beauty of compassion. Years later, as Emily watched children running through the hospital garden her foundation had built, she whispered softly, "You were right, James. The richest people are the ones who give love freely." And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the wind, she swore she could hear his voice, gentle, proud, eternal, whisper back, "You kept your promise."